Hey guys, I'm Anne Richmond, aka Hearthsinger, the head bard in charge round these parts, and with the ending of Critical Role Campaign 2, and recently the ending of my Eberron campaign, and soon to come the ending of my Strahd campaign, I've got sunsets on the brain. Ending a campaign is a rare and daunting task, and plenty of dungeon masters out there never even get the pleasure of accomplishing this. Players, too. More often than not, that ripcord gets pulled long before closure can ever happen by players or the dungeon master getting bored, quitting, moving, the party's not right, any number of reasons. But for those few, those happy few who are lucky enough to find an ending together, there's not a lot of information on the internet about how to create a satisfying ending to your campaign. So I thought, why not take a little bit of time today and think about how to accomplish just that? A big misstep to avoid is that planning for the end happens before the end is there. When you feel that final arc approaching, the best thing to do is to talk about it. No one likes an ambush, and people are usually, if you're lucky, and you probably are if you've gotten this far, emotionally invested in the story, in their characters, and in the time you spend together. Giving folks a chance to accept that the end is nigh is nice. It gives people a chance to find peace as players and as characters before you reach that chapter. Once the table understands that the end is coming, I like to reach out to people individually and ask some pretty pointed questions. In previous videos, I've covered character creation and the 3 questions I like to ask to make sure that people have an active character to bring to the table at the outset of the story. But here I have 3 questions to help you achieve satisfying sunset for the story. The first question is, what do you feel the central theme for your character has become? This helps me understand how to create a satisfying conclusion to the individual character's arc through their lived experience. If the player feels that their central theme has been, redemption, and when we talk about this question, they feel that that hasn't been satisfied, then I need to find a way into that during the final arc. The next question is about NPCs. What NPCs, if any, do they want to interface with before the end of the story? Every party has favorite NPCs, and some are appropriate to bring into final battles, and some may be less so. But this question helps me understand if there's unfinished business with a particular person or location that they might need to fulfill in that final arc. So I might place quest givers or important plot points accordingly so they have those opportunities should they want to take advantage of them. And if that NPC is super out of the way of where the plot is headed, it gives me a chance to warn the player that if they don't take distinct action to achieve it, that it might not happen until the epilogue after the main storyline is settled. And the final and perhaps most important question that I like to ask is, what personal business does your character need to settle before the end of the story? Is it something that they want to settle with the group, or is it something they can settle on their own? I think this is really helpful because as much as we as players attempt to equally share the spotlight, and as much as the DM attempts to weave backstory elements and opportunities into the game, if that's your bag, sometimes personal goals fall by the wayside and they may be more or less important to the players. Here's why that feels so vital to me. I was in a game of Storm King's Thunder that played super regularly for about 2 years, and we suddenly found out from the dungeon master that the next game was the end of the campaign. And I suddenly felt so hurt, and I couldn't put my finger on why. Until I came to terms with the fact that I honestly felt we'd addressed one character's development a lot more thoroughly than the other 2. And I felt that myself and another player had really been left by the wayside. The warlock hadn't addressed any issues with their patron. I hadn't gotten to address any issues with the person who had abused me early on in life. And had there been a proper off-ramp to that game, I might have been able to understand how I could fit that into a personal epilogue or address it during an entire arc leading up to the conclusion. But as it was, there was no time. It forced me to have this emotional conversation with my dungeon master where I had to tell him that I felt left out and let down. And then he in turn didn't have any time to fix it. We were heading into the final battle, and that was it. And unfortunately for little old Farrah Beestinger, she died. And I never got to address any of it because there was no epilogue for her to grieve. So that's why the answer to that question is so deeply important to me. I never want anyone to feel that. It was awful. And I understand that my dungeon master, there's no way that he wanted me to feel those things either. It was all just a situation we'd gotten ourselves into because of a lack of communication leading up to the point. Which leads me to the importance of providing an epilogue for your story. Providing this epilogue can uncork some of that pressure provided by the need to satisfy so many different people's goals and priorities before the big bad is vanquished forever. And that is one of the central struggles of creating a satisfying Dungeons and Dragons story. In a normal book or a movie, there might be 1 or 2 main characters. Here, you have 3 to 5 that you're building this entire thing around, sometimes even more, and everything is improvised and built on a moving framework of the Dungeon Master's hopes and dreams. Sticking that landing perfectly is nearly impossible, so don't hold yourself to that standard. You, by design, don't have total control. No one does in that situation. When players understand that there is an epilogue coming, I think they're more happy to prioritize the group goals over personal needs and vendettas because they know that they'll get a chance to settle those scores afterwards. Personally, I like there to be a little bit of space between the end of the group real-time story and the epilogue, which means I set it in a totally different session. And during that time, I ask people to think about, what do you want for the end of your character? Come in with the seed of an idea. And then when we all sit down together, it's like a storytelling cuddle puddle. Everybody has drinks and food and just sits down and chats. And then it's my job as the dungeon master to sort of moderate that conversation, and I handle it loosely as a group discussion, going character by character and allowing them to invite other people into their epilogue stories when it's appropriate, but I'm really there just to make sure that every person gets their moment in the sun to say goodbye. I feel the epilogue should feel like a reward, and to that end, as a dungeon master, I sort of loosen the reins. I want to give almost complete agency over what happens to the players, and they can discuss things lightly, they can dive into personal interactions if they wish, but it's fun to let them finally have whatever they want. They've worked hard for it, they've earned it. The epilogue of my Eberron game was probably the most successful that I've ever been a part of. It was a large group conversation, like I said, moving character by character, and we covered a huge span of time, diving into individual interactions when it was important, but not needing everything to be fully role-played and described. We had weddings, we talked about children, the shift in politics for the world, and we covered post-adventuring careers and even death for particular characters who wanted to include it. The most that the dungeon master did during that whole time was say, yeah, that makes sense, or that would be pretty challenging. How do you think you would go about achieving that? And because of that, it was a lot easier to say goodbye because we had as much control over the end of our characters as we did with character creation. And hey, no one is saying the end has to be the end. You can come back as a group to address some unsolved mystery left unchecked, or you can take that character into another one-shot or a game you're playing. There aren't any rules around this. Plus, as the dungeon master, I love to bring in characters from previous campaigns as NPCs so people can see where they ended up, and I think they like to be surprised by that kind of thing. Lastly, I wanted to cover how you, the Dungeon Master, figure out how to literally end the game. What say, what do? It can be so challenging, but think about it this way. You've asked the players now what they wanted to achieve and what themes they saw coming across. Why not ask yourself the same questions, but focused on the whole world you've been playing in? It's important to remember that you're a player at the table too, and you have worked so hard for this. You've done the scheduling, you've kept up with all of your prep. You deserve to see the sunset of that world with the same rose-colored glasses. So reflect on the themes of your campaign. Were they as you intended, or did they shift with what the players wanted to investigate and deal with? If your theme was, let's say, survival, how can you show that what the characters accomplished eased that pressure that the world was feeling when the characters began their journey? While the players are thinking about how they've changed, you get to think about what they've changed. Talk about how what they did changed the world for the better and sometimes for the worse, and figure out if you want to offer them any invitations to continue to shape that world in a particular way during the epilogue. And you know, it's not just what they've changed, it's who they've changed. Don't be afraid to be personal and touch on the lives that are different because the characters lived. And don't at me, but I love The Last Jedi. So spoilers, I guess, if you care and you haven't seen it for some reason. But the boy with the broom looking at the sky, forever changed because of his brush with the Resistance, is such a beautiful moment. It can be a Herculean task to focus the final words of your campaign on an entire group of people. So sometimes it's easier to just pick someone else who is a lens through which to view the experience of your story. For some, the end is just the beginning, which means you can foreshadow a cool NPC or the big bad for the next game. I don't know, it's just an idea, think about it. And that's all I have for today, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, all that jazz. I know you probably hear that from everyone on this platform, but that's because it really does help more people discover our videos and join the awesome community of baby bards we have here. So if you're new, welcome. This channel is supported by Eldritch Foundry, fine makers of customized miniatures, so make sure you go and check them out because they are running a 15% off flash sale until the end of June 2021. So go check them out. Hey, if you want that discount all the time, you can join my Patreon, patreon.com/HearthsingerGames. You will be granted a 15% discount to everything on the Eldritch Foundry site forever, and Patreon subscribers also get access to sign up for my exclusive Dungeons & Dragons games and community events. So what's not to love? Thanks for hanging out, guys. I'll see you on the flippity flop. Now get out there and live your quest life. Bye! It's the final countdown, gonna roll dice. Oh no, you might die. Gotta play nice with your allies, cause when the big bad hits the map, you might not want to regret things you said about their mom. And that's my dog. Gotta go.